October in northern Iceland is a season of encroaching shadows. This is the volcanic land behind Húsavík, a place where the terrain is empty, lifeless, and avoided as soon as the sun dips below the horizon. For the 100 residents who live here, survival depends on a set of rigid rules. These are not ghost stories told for entertainment. They are the functional boundaries of life in a place where the darkness feels heavier than the cold. Daniel Hayes, a journalist from Boston, arrived in the middle of this stillness. He was chasing the kind of authenticity that only exists in the world's most remote corners, looking to document the culture of a town that the rest of the world had largely forgotten. When you enter a landscape this isolated and ignore the survival rules of the people who live there, you leave yourself exposed. You are a modern observer in a place that operates on much older, harsher logic. Daniel's host, an elderly man named Jon, led him to a small wooden house set apart from the rest of the town. It was a simple structure, designed to withstand the wind, but it felt unnervingly solitary. Before leaving, Jon stopped at the door and gave Daniel a single, uncompromising instruction. If there is a knock after midnight, do not answer it. Do not look outside, no matter what you hear. Daniel viewed the warning through the lens of a traveler. He saw it as a piece of local folklore, a superstitious quirk to be recorded in his notes, rather than a literal command for his own safety. By treating Jon's fear as a curiosity, Daniel had already lowered his guard. He was looking for a story, unaware that he was stepping into the middle of one. At 1:40 a.m., the first anomaly occurred. As Daniel lay in the dark, 3 deliberate, rhythmic knocks sounded against the front door. Then a voice called his name. It sounded like it was being filtered through water, distorted and distant, but unmistakable. It was a sound that didn't belong in the Icelandic wind. Daniel stood up and walked toward the door. He reached for the handle, his fingers inches from the metal, but he froze. For a moment, the silence of the house became more terrifying than the voice outside. He didn't open it that night, but the silence that followed was different. Whatever was standing on the other side of that wood now knew his name. The following nights brought a shift in tone. The knocking began earlier, at 12:17 a.m., accompanied by the sound of something sharp dragging slowly across the wooden planks, leaving deep, jagged scores in the grain. The voice changed too. It lost its watery distortion and began to sound exactly like Jon. It captured his accent, his pitch, and the specific way he hesitated between words. The voice pleaded with him. It talked about the biting cold and the wind. It was no longer a stranger calling a name. It was a friend asking for help, using Daniel's own sense of decency to get him to move toward the latch. The entity was no longer just making noise. It was searching for the specific emotional frequency that would make Daniel turn the lock. On the 4th night, the pressure became too much. Against every warning he had been given, Daniel walked to the window and pulled back the curtain to see who or what was standing on his doorstep. He saw himself. A figure stood in the dark with his face and his clothes, but its eyes were completely black, and it wore a smile that was too wide and too still to be human. The duplicate raised its hand to knock, but as its knuckles moved in the air outside, the sound of the knocking erupted from inside the house, coming from the walls directly behind Daniel. The moment he looked, the barrier was gone. The sound had migrated from the exterior wood to the interior plaster, following the path his eyes had cleared. The 5th night began with a total absence of sound. No knocking, no scratching, and no voices. At 3:03 a.m., the house was perfectly, unnaturally still. Daniel woke up, unable to move. He was pinned to the bed by his own weight, his breath shallow, his muscles locked. He was awake, but his body had become a cage. In the corner of the room, a tall, thin figure began to move. Its limbs bent at impossible angles as it glided toward him. Its face was a blur of motion, cycling through the features of Jon and Daniel before settling into something unidentifiable. He couldn't scream or turn away. He could only watch as the thing that had been knocking for 5 nights finally stood over him. The creature leaned down, its face inches from his. The floorboards vibrated with a heavy, low frequency that Daniel could feel in his chest. It didn't attack him. It simply leaned into his ear and whispered, in his own exact voice, "You should have opened the door." The struggle was over. It hadn't come for his life. It had come for his place. The next morning, the house was empty. The door was still locked from the inside, and Daniel's camera and notes were sitting exactly where he had left them. There were no footprints in the volcanic ash outside. The townspeople found only one change. Carved deep into the wood on the inside of the front door were 4 words. "I let it in." In the remote corners of the world, these entities do not force their way inside. They wait for permission. And once that permission is granted, they replace the person who gave it.